Hi, I'm Mark Greene, founder of Trinity Spiritual Center. Recently, I had a conversation with Mark Greene, senior editor of the Good Men Project and founder of Remaking Manhood, about the dominance-based culture of masculinity that is so damaging to women and men around the world. Apparently, our talk was deeply moving, as a video of our conversation has received more views than any other program that the center has offered. In order to facilitate a community-wide discussion about this important topic, we've pulled several clips from Mark's comments that highlight the challenges of raising boys and girls in this current tough environment. The following video is only 10 minutes long and well worth your time. I hope you enjoy it.
I just want to set the focus of the conversation with a simple statement. The conversation about masculinity is a conversation about disconnection. It's about the ways in which our larger culture of masculinity for generations has taught boys and men to perform a version of masculinity which is inherently individualizing and isolating and disconnecting. And there was a guy named Paul Kivel in the early 1980s who went into high schools in the Bay Area as part of an initiative to try and understand why there was so much violence against women in that community. And he ended up asking boys, what are the rules for being a man? And the answers he got back were pretty straightforward. And we have a slide here, I believe, with a list of, what most of those rules were that he came across. And the first and top rule of this so-called man box, he called it the act like a man box. And he literally drew a box up on the blackboard in these high schools and wrote the rules in. And whenever a boy got outside the boundaries of that box, of those sets of rules, they would be policed and bullied by other boys to get back into that sort of narrow performance of masculinity. But the first and foremost rule of the man box was don't show your emotions. And we have generations of masculinity, we have media, we have parenting styles, we have all these different reinforcements of that idea that if you're having an emotional moment, hide it. And it begins in infancy for boys. They fall down, scrape their knee on the playground at age 3 or 4 and start crying. The message to them is, okay, shake it off, brush it off, you're all right, you're okay. And if they fail to stop crying, maybe their cohort, maybe their parent will say, man up, be a man. Or they might say, what are you, a sissy? What are you, a girl? And in this way, they're sort of telling that kid that this expression, this most extreme expression of emotion, which is crying, isn't really appropriate for boys. So we have this slippery slope where we disconnect boys from community, from the emotional expression of who they are authentically, and then move them into this hierarchical, domination-based construct of masculinity, okay? So boys and men learn very quickly that in that world, who they are authentically isn't relevant, and that if they want to express in ways that will validate that masculine construct, they have to do it by dominating the people around them. They have to be hard-charging, winning, competitive, tough, stoic, all of these things. That's man-box culture, and that is why man-box culture has led to generations of the denigration of women. So, that being said, most of the men in this room either know men or in their own lives can say honestly, well, I'm not like that, or I didn't do it that way, or I've always been a rebel. Mark, you have some stories along those lines where you gave pushback to that construct. But when we have 46% of men in America answering yes to that question, that they should know where their girlfriend is at all times, but wouldn't necessarily want to be known where they are at all times, then we still have a huge challenge with our culture of masculinity. And that's what I think the problem statement is for today. And this is what our sons our young sons, when we talk about raising boys in a healthy way, we're talking about going up against that construct. That's one of the reasons why be a breadwinner, not a caregiver, is such a strong edict in the man box. Because if you're bringing home the paycheck, then you have a lot of control over what happens in the home. And it's an old model. You know, when men first went onto the factory floor in the Industrial Revolution, they basically made a deal with the devil, which is, you can treat me how you want in this factory, and I can treat everybody in my home the way I want to. And it led to lives for women who at that time were not allowed to work, were not allowed to get educations, were not allowed to vote. It led to lives for women which were basically whether you got lucky or not with the man in your home. And that was a brutal level of imbalance, but they knew that if that paycheck didn't come home, they'd be out on the street pretty quickly, and their children would be at risk and everything else. So come forward into the modern era, women have fought tooth and nail to get the rights ultimately to economic independence via the vote, via education, via work, via all these things. But you still see constant pressure on women challenging their right to come into those spaces, both in terms of how women are treated in the workplace, the kinds of microaggressions that go on still to this day in the working world, the degree to which we hold women leaders accountable in a very different and imbalanced way than we do male leaders, all of that stuff. So we have this constant belief among men that women reaching true equity is a threat to our comfort level or our ability to have control. And it's that need for control all the time which speaks to the trauma that boys deal with early on. Boys aren't born with a need to control those around them. They're born with a need to protect themselves. And when they're hit with trauma over and over again by a dominance-based masculinity, they end up adopting control as the only way to try to find safety. So what we have is a culture bearing down on boys from a very early age, teaching them that every aspect of their natural relational capacity to form and care for friendships is girly, gay, or an expression of being a little kid. And then that pressure just stays in place until they finally let go of those connections. And by the way, it is in late adolescence that these boys are then encouraged to, well, if you want any kind of compassion, connection, get a girlfriend. And they're sent over toward a young lady who is in no way, shape, or form ready to provide that level of connection, to replace all of the other possible social relationships and friendships that these boys have relied on. So we get this whole problem of women's unearned emotional labor beginning at that early stage, and these boys are basically told that's the only source for, and God help you if you happen to be a gay boy, because then you're totally out of luck, right? This moves forward into a lot of health research and a lot of other information later in life, where we've come to understand that men who do not have a circle of close, intimate friendships with other men face dramatically higher health risks than men who do have a circle of friends. And I'm not talking about men who sit around and have a few beers for a couple of hours and talk about sports or whatever. I'm talking about men who actually share what's going on for them in their lives. But if you do not have that resource, and there's reams of research about this, then what you're looking at is dramatically higher likelihood of heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, diabetes, depression, a lot of other stuff. So we have a process by which both men and women internalize man-box culture and then enforce it, right? And you know, there may be imagine a husband and a wife, or a husband and a non-gender binary person, or whatever partnership it is, where the husband says, you know, I think I'm going to get out of this man box thing. I'm going to start performing differently at work. And the wife may say, look, we got 3 kids, we got college bills, we got this and that. Those guys are not going to buy into that at work. You're going to put us at risk. So fine, do that at home if you'd like, but don't do that out in the world because it's not safe. So by the same, in the same way, there may be parents who absolutely understand that dominance-based masculinity and all those limitations of boys are bad for our sons, but they might say to themselves, but I don't want him to be the one who takes the beating. So I got to teach him some of this stuff just to make sure he's okay out there, right? So we have very smart, informed, thoughtful people who still see the overarching structure as a threat if we don't play along to some degree. And that's another aspect of this that's really challenging because it speaks to the question of what is strength and what is power for boys and girls, for non-binary people, for human beings. Is it the ability to model dominance, or is it the ability to form community and connection? I'll tell you straight up, if you look at the health data, it's community and connection. Because those other people are dying earlier. They simply are. If a hierarchy of masculinity with white men at the top, if that's the best place to be, why is that particular demographic, why does that demographic have the highest suicide rates? We're talking about a system that's broken top to bottom. Our job as parents is to try and intercede early with boys and girls in terms of helping them grow their relational intelligence, their ability to center and care for relationships, which is antithetical to what we as men in the Manbox are taught. We're taught to center our roles, our power, our status, and in this hierarchical system, we need to learn to dominate those around us or we'll lose status, and that increases the number of men who can dominate us. So it's a survival game where we keep trying to work our way up by being more and more dominant. And all of us know that you can't have a healthy, meaningful friendship with someone who's dominating you or someone you're dominating. So the long and short of it is we can either intercede when boys are very young, or we're going to have to fix what's broken in men who are reaching that point where the game isn't working for them anymore. I think what we're really fundamentally talking about here is a narrow, constrained expression of masculinity versus masculinities, a vast range of potential ways to be men, to be non-binary people, to be women, opening it up from conformity, narrow pressure, to the full range so that every human being can find their place on that spectrum that feels natural to them. Included, now if I sit here and say to you, we need a vast range of masculinities, but not traditional masculinity because we don't like that one. That'd be hypocritical, right? That would be antithetical to my belief, which is that all masculinities are equally valid. So understand that the Manbox culture isn't about traditional masculinity, it's about the enforcement of it, that as the only way. On that spectrum, for some men, that's a good fit. So we're not teaching a new set of rules. We're saying, can we please take the freaking rules out of this and instead co-create in collaboration with the people in our lives a version of being human that fits for us as individuals. When I talk about remaking manhood, I'm not saying take this manhood and make it that one. I'm saying each human being who happens to be male identifying can design their own way of being without taking heat from the men around them or from the women around them or from whoever might choose to critique that. And instead, we have a culture of masculinity which is like, these are all equally valid. These are all equally valid expressions. And we love you for what is coming to you in your own development as a human being.
Beautiful.
There it is, I hope.